Alright, so in the last video I covered the difference between a short, long, and infinite task, and now I'd like to go over the difference between running a stateful versus running a stateless task. As the name implies, a stateful is one as a task that has a state, while a stateless is one without a state, and that's not exactly the most conducive of information. However, what I have found from reading up on multi-threading and different stateful versus stateless is that within a stateful task, we're actually going to have persistent data, and the information inside of it can be accessed more easily. So if you're going to run something on the game thread within your actual task, so I've opened up a task, and if you place down the run on game thread, maybe this is using you're just needing to spawn something in onto the game thread, because as I previously mentioned, you can't do that within a task itself. You have to run it on the game thread. So if you're going to need to pull information from your task and then briefly run it on the game thread, you will need the persistent data that is existing within the task while it is being computed. So that is where you would use a stateful. And a stateless is just going to be like a fire and forget. It is just computation. You just need the end result. You don't need anything within it. So you just start it and you want the finished product. Now we have a couple of different nodes. If you just put in async, we can see the nodes here underneath the threading async. And there are several. I've previously gone over the create and destroy thread pool, but we just need to focus now on the different types of create and runs and just the runs. So I've pulled up each one for the stateful. As we can see here, we have create and run stateful async task. That's all it is. We're just going to create it and run it, and then we're going to have our callback to when it's done. We can just create the event and select a function from here, making a new one to run whatever after we need. As I've shown, I have my own little post async function that will then pull information out of my calculation and allow me to generate the actual procedural generation. So I'm going to render it, I should say. If we have a create and run async task with callback in separate thread, it explains itself pretty well within the title. That is going to be where this actual callback is not run on the game thread. It's going to run it on another one. Now, I don't know what impact this would have on creating objects or spawning actors. I'm assuming it would not work. You would still need to spawn anything within the game thread, so you wouldn't want to use this separate thread. I don't have an example or a use case for this, but it is something that exists, and I do find it to be a little interesting that if you read at the bottom, it says the target is unsafe async library, and it does that for anything that mentions in the separate thread. So I don't know if that was meant to be a little bit of a warning or such, but I would potentially avoid using this unless you know exactly or have a exact use case in which you just need to run some more computation or something on another separate thread. I'm not totally sure. And now we have a create async task versus a run. This right here, these two covered doing all of this together in just one node. However, this does not allow you to put in information to like pass in variables. As we see up here, I have my own that is running my calculation, and I'm actually able to pass in variables. And that was just done by creating a variable and then just ensuring that I've selected instance editable as well as expose on spawn. And then just selecting it. So I'm actually using the second one, refreshing it. Or I guess I didn't compile. There we go. And refreshing it, and now we see that the variable is there. So this allows me to now pass in variables, as opposed to this, if I were to try to do the same thing, refresh node, we can't pass in anything into this. The one thing you do need to make sure you do is ensure that you set the return value as a actual variable. Otherwise, as this warns, it might get garbage collected while the task is running, and that could cause some issues down the line. So this is just simply creating the task and running it. And then we have the similar second one where we create the task, we run it, and then we have a callback right here on a separate thread. And with this, creating a task, running it, this time we have a manager. From what I could understand about the managers is, sorry, I should have hovered over here. If you hover over here, it says that the async task manager replaces outer with itself. Now, what it's referring to is right here. All an outer is to prevent the task from getting garbage collected. And from what I can understand of this is that if your task needs no other objects, you can just use this node. If you're going to try to spawn in things, if outer implements get world, such as spawned actor, async task can interact with the world. So I'm assuming if you do want to do any type of actor spawning, you do not want to use the with manager. I'm not, that's about what I could understand. And if anyone understands that better, I would gladly take any feedback. I'm not totally sure what more the manager could be outside of that. And then secondly, we have another, this is quite a mouthful, running a stateful async task with manager with callback in a separate thread. So that's just doing the same, having a callback in a separate thread while having also this object manager. And then over here is identical, except every single one is for the stateless. And just to go over it again, the difference between a stateful and stateless is that there is actual, oh, I've forgotten the word. Perpetual, there we go. There's, or persistent data that is held within the stateful as it has a state. So you could pull information out of it while it's running, unlike the stateless that is just going to fire and forget and give you your computation. I hope that can help make some sense of this. If you happen to know more than what I said, or if I incorrectly informed on anything, please let me know. This has been a lot of reading and a lot of understanding of some pretty nuanced information that I was pretty new to, so I would appreciate any feedback, but I do feel as though I did read up on this quite well, so the information should be quite solid. Anyways, if you have any questions outside of that, I am always here to answer, so feel free to ask. And the next video, I think, actually that might be about it for the for this plugin. So if I have another video, then excellent. I'll see you then.